Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today I will be reviewing the Sony a7 III digital mirrorless camera. Just a little warning if you are not super familiar with camera jargon and things like that. Some of these words might not make sense, but I'm going to do my best to explain in simple terms what I'm talking about with all the features in this camera. So let's talk about some of the features of this camera. We'll start with quality of picture, in other words, megapixels. So when you're shooting just normal pictures on the camera, you have 24.2 megapixels, and when you're shooting in video, you can get a 4K video. Basically, it doesn't really matter too much the megapixels of a camera. A lot of people think it does, but it only really matters if you're printing pictures that are going to be displayed larger than, let's say, 5 feet. So for anything that you're going to put in a normal home or at a wedding or any normal printing that you're going to be doing, 24.2 megapixels is more than enough. Same with 4K shooting. If you're going for something more commercial, if you're going to be printing things on banners that are going to be really big, if it's going to be displayed on the side of the road, advertising, you're going to want to go for a camera that has more megapixels, so when it's blown up really big, you still get the clarity. But for all of your normal everyday use, this is lots of megapixels, and you'll get super great quality, clear, sharp photos. Next, let's talk about the focus capabilities of this camera. Sony has two different ways that you can go when choosing the focus mode that you shoot in. You can either do autofocus or manual focus. Most people will go for autofocus, and I'll be honest, Sony's autofocus in this camera is amazing. It actually detects the eye of your subject, which is super nice because it catches onto the eye and then the rest of the subject will be in focus. You can also go manual though if you want, and you can manually just kind of move the focus box around, which can also be good if you're trying to focus on a part of the photo that and you don't want the subject to be in focus. The only bad thing that I will say about the autofocus is that it is so quick, so sharp, that sometimes you are going to get too sharp of photos. So let me give you an example of this. A lot of people right now, especially in portrait photography, are really going for like a cinematic, grainy, blurry kind of feel, and a lot of clients are liking that. So if you're shooting on autofocus, it's going to be hard to get that grainy, blurry motion that you might be looking for. But that's pretty easy to fix. Just put it on manual and make sure it's not on your subject and you'll totally get that blur. So love the autofocus, super, super nice. This camera also has a super awesome and versatile f-stop. Basically, what that means is the depth of field that it can shoot in. It can go down to as low as 1.8 and it can go pretty high. I've gotten my f-stop up to f20, which you don't really ever need to use, but I have. And when I mean depth of focus, I mean how blurry your background is going to be. If you have an f-stop of 1.8, the background is going to be quite blurry. So think iPhone's portrait mode, that is how blurry the background is going to be. Okay, but it also provides a nice, in the photography world, we call it bokeh, but basically it's just nice, creamy background. It looks natural, it's not grainy, that kind of stuff. But if you're wanting to get more of your background in focus, let's say you're taking pictures of a large group or you're doing landscape photography and you want more of your photo in focus, you can manually change the f-stop so that way you can get more of the background and foreground in focus, which is also nice. But it's just nice to have those options, so depending on what you're shooting, you can switch that up. The f-stop also matters when you're shooting with different lighting situations. You're going to want a lower f-stop, which means it will contract the lens of the camera so it's smaller, so less light will get in if you're shooting on, say, a really bright sunny day. But you can also make it bigger if you're shooting in low light situations, so that's also nice. Speaking of low light situations, this camera does very, very well, all things considered, when you don't have a ton of light in your shooting. The ISO which basically controls the amount of light that you're going to see in your picture, can go up to 4,000 or more, which is nuts, okay? The only thing is once you get past 1,000 ISO, you're going to start seeing some significant noise in your photos, which is okay because you can edit that out, but it's just something that you want to be aware of. But it is better than a lot of other cameras that are similar in mirrorless quality to it. The other nice thing about this camera is that it has 2 spots for SD cards, which is super nice. If you're doing event photography and something happens to one of your SD cards, that could be catastrophic because all of your photos are just on the one. But in this camera, you are required to shoot with 2, so it automatically backs your photos up onto 2 different sources, which is really, really nice. The other nice thing is that the battery life is pretty good. I am a wedding photographer. I've shot full weddings. I'm talking 6 to 8 hour days on one battery with this bad boy. So that is super nice, something that you always want to hear. Based on all of these things, I would highly, highly recommend this camera. It is a little bit older. It was released by Sony in 2018, but all of its specs are really up to date, and it's versatile in its use. So you can use it for a lot of different kinds of photography, whether it's sports or landscape or portrait. It really just depends on what lens you put on it for the different capabilities that you're going to want to use it for. It's super user friendly, so it's easy for beginners, but you also have so much control over your photos that a professional would be more than happy with this camera as well. So I would definitely recommend this camera to anyone. It's a great product, and if you're interested in getting into photography, it's a little bit more on the pricey side, but it has a lot of bang for your buck.